Welcome to Building Better Businesses, an ABA podcast. Learn firsthand from business owners who've built successful ABA businesses. Utilize proven techniques and strategies to help your practice thrive. This is Building Better Businesses, an ABA podcast with Jonathan Mueller.
My name is Jonathan Mueller. I'm the host of Building Better Businesses in ABA, and today I'm joined by Holli Beth, who's been in the ABA field for nearly a decade, serving as an RBT, a training specialist, recruiting leader, and much more. Holli Beth is an influencer on LinkedIn and passionate about recruiting, neurodiversity, and she herself has an autism diagnosis. Holli Beth, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this. I'm excited to be here. Super humble.
I'm excited to have you here, Holli Beth. I know this has been a long time in the coming. So let's just start with, how did the ABA field find you?
Yeah, so that journey goes back. I'm going to age myself, and this is not a correction that I would love to make, but it's almost 2 decades now. I really stumbled into it. I was a single mom of 2 kids with special needs, and I found an integrated preschool, which was really advanced in 2005. I had the opportunity to get that set up to support them, and I was in between jobs, and the director there said, I really think that you have a talent with this population. And I thought, that's a lot of responsibility for me because there's such an important role. And so he encouraged me to take a chance, and it was the best decision that I've ever made. And I'm so grateful to him.
Tell me more about your own autism journey and diagnosis.
Yeah, so I probably would have been in the class that I started in. So I was nonverbal. And so really until 7, I had my own language, I guess, is how they put it in Easter seals when I look back at some of my reports. But communication has always been a challenge. The diagnosis wasn't really supported the way that I presented as old as I am. So I missed out on some of that support early on. But as I started to work in this population, I realized, oh, wait, hold on. Your communication makes way more sense than like some communications that I have in the world out there so far. And I started to realize I had a lot in common. And it really did help me have that empathy and that understanding, and almost a key to unlocking some of the communication styles that are different. And it was really cool and very special. And I started to see certain things in my son that presented as autism as well. So I really sought out his diagnosis first. And then what I realized, and it's really interesting, I'll try to not get lost in this idea, but if anybody wants to work on this book, I'm just going to lay it down there for you. So as I moved up in ABA and I went from RBT to training to then into recruiting, as I moved up to each level, I realized it's actually a different skill set and communication. And so I had to kind of relearn things. At the time I went for my diagnosis, I actually thought I had OCD. I was not so terribly surprised by the diagnosis, but I went there because of my need to have things in a particular order at work. And when they came back with the diagnosis, I thought, oh, okay, this makes way more sense on why I need to relearn some communication skills in every new situation. I can't generalize necessarily. And so that was really an interesting find for me and in my development professionally and personally.
Thank you for sharing that. And especially thank you for your courage and vulnerability to even talk about your journey. Mental health is still something, even in spite of COVID helping us to have, I think, as a society, better conversations around this and more awareness. We still have a long way to go. And it's interesting, Holli Beth, when I got my own ADD and generalized anxiety diagnosis as an adult, when I went to my first session, I don't think I've ever told this to anyone, but when I went to my first session with a psychologist, because I had to go through a series of rounds of testing, he said, yeah, you might have ADD or you might be bipolar. And I'll never forget, just him describing that. It ended up not being bipolar, but just put me in this entirely different mindset that almost crushed I don't know. I don't know if it was because I wasn't expecting it. I was expecting something else. But I think it's part of this idea of, as we confront whom we really are and we peel back layers of the onion, it can be a hard process to go through.
It's extremely challenging, and it's interesting that you brought up bipolar. I was actually misdiagnosed after my second child was born and put on medicine that was for bipolar, and it was a misdiagnosis, and so that medicine actually put me in a pretty bad spot. But it is common because it does seem to other people that we're going up and down, right? And we're
Hmm.
not making sense because one time we're having a conversation and it's going well, we agree, and then a new thing happens, and you would think that it was already addressed and that we're going through the entire thing over again when we were just fine. And all of a sudden, we show up differently. And it can mimic bipolar in that way, but it's actually there is the anxiety driving the change. So there is a why. It could, and there's many different whys. It depends. But for me, it's typically trying to avoid any uncomfortable unknowns and trusting my environment. And so I don't show up necessarily always in the best way because of it.
Hey, I didn't fully appreciate that. Holly Beth, what would you want others to know about what it's like to live a day in the life of Holly Beth Causer?
I don't know. I think that, I every day is different. I try to show up my very best self, but that I've learned over time that a day in the life of Holly Beth Causer has to be taken at the moment in time. And so I can't really like give a whole general conversation of what that would look like um or do it justice. But I will say that every day is a new journey for me and a new opportunity to do better or different and all of that.
Right on. Well, one of the things that I've been passionate about more recently, as much as I love, the services that we provide and the work we do as a field, it feels like there's an obligation on those of us who don't have direct experience living with autism. There's an obligation for us to create a more autism friendly world, as opposed to just thinking about this as it's just about services, right? Or skills development or behavior reduction. Like, how can
Yeah.
I and others create a more autism friendly world?
So I realized I got off track when I mentioned the book. So this brings me right back to it. And that is that curiosity, right? There's not, in my knowledge, I've looked for it and I haven't really found anything of satisfaction of helping somebody who has the level autism I do that doesn't always present where people can understand it because it's not really seen. And I present differently in different situations and I mirror a lot. And so that can be difficult. And so, having some more research to be able to develop some skills to navigate this corporate world is something that I think is really needed. So I'll speak to, my own experience with that. Um, and I think it starts with curiosity and helping to understand that sometimes it's difficult for me or, some of my other peers to advocate in a timely way because we might not recognize what's going on until it's too late to repair. And so something that I've really learned as I've gone through is that trust is an issue because there's so many things that I can't trust in the world that having a one safe person always at work is something just to establish right away is that is your source of truth. Fail so that you okay. Because it's tricky. Politics are really tricky. Navigating people is tricky. Definitely can do it, but having those support in place and then transition out as we would with anybody, it would be my suggestion or what I think might be needed.
That's a powerful insight. I mean, I think curiosity, that would just make ours a more kind and friendly world in the first place, right? But just having that idea of having someone who's like yeah, safe, and a source of truth at work is powerful. Well, one of the things you and I share in common is we're super passionate about the work we do, ABA, applied behavior analysis. And like I've described before, it's like Jedi's using the force, right? Changing behavior by reshaping environments. And it can be transformative in a child and family's life. And we've heard a lot about, trauma that ABA has caused from individual autistics and self advocates. But tell me more your take on what's going on with this current ABA versus anti ABA debate.
Absolutely. So it breaks my heart. And I'll be honest with you. I hear all sides of it and all voices of what is going on and all the narratives, and I think that each one is valid. As I try and how I kind of think through things as analogies, and I try to take a situation that is easier for me to understand and then try to apply it. And so I'm going to answer this question. if you're okay with that, comparing it, if you will. My my daughter, she's gonna love that I shared this. Hopefully, she won't be listening to the podcast. But she had some warts on the bottom of her butt, and so super lovely. But I had had plantar warts as well in the past, and so when I went in, I had asked, why are you not freezing it and digging it out? That's what I'm used to. And response was, we've really learned as this procedure, really has evolved in the way that when you freeze and you dig it out, it can cause some nerve damage. And so we no longer practice that. And if any doctors ever, recommend that, I would seek a second opinion. Because that's no longer really practiced. And I thought, wow, I really appreciate the education. I can also give some grace, understanding that nobody back then maybe intentionally did it. Maybe, there was some learning curve. Now, I know that's a very blanket statement, and I won't go as bold to say that there's no bad apples because there's bad apples in everywhere. But my belief is to have more open conversations, putting safeguards in place and educating the consumer, which is, us and the parents and everybody on how to find a place where we can trust again, but verify. So that is something that was shared with me, right? It sticks. Trust, but verify. So always make sure you're asking the questions and that you're doing the research and that you know what to look for. But I think that it would be a disservice for people not to get ABA services in the right way, self-advocacy, listening for those opportunities, where your child or you are taught how to use communication to empower yourself or to empower your loved one. Just know what to look for. And, I still go to a dermatologist. My son now has warts. I don't know. Maybe we need a clean, but, um, but I'm still going to go see a dermatologist. I didn't block out a whole entire opportunity to seek treatment for people who need it. Um, did that make sense? Because
Yeah.
it's tricky to
Mhm.
navigate. Me.
That makes all the sense in the world. I mean, what I heard is the ways that medicine generally works is that we evolve over time, right? And treatments evolve over time. I mean, heck, we used to do lobotomies, what, as recently as the 50s and
Yeah.
60s. And and it's true, those doctors were doing things, I mean, they signed up for the Hippocratic Oath and they were doing things for what they thought was right. And as we learn better, we do better.
Yeah, trust and verify. And just know, right? That's part of the journey. So I just want to shout out their consent and everything is just making sure that the person is able to consent or has a good trusted individual to help.
Well, let's talk about one of the things, you spent much of your career in recruiting and, um, the flip side of recruiting that's just not talked about is retention, right? Like you could be like as
Yeah.
amazing a recruiter as you are, but if just everyone's leaving out the back and then you can't be as successful as a recruiter. So I know you put a lot of time and thought into the costs of turnover and vacancy. Do you want to share a little bit more about how you think about that cost?
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of things that need to be considered when you're looking at vacancy and turnover. And I do see both sides of it, the business side of it and what it takes to be able to offer, quality services and take care of your employees, take care of your clients in the way that is needed. But I think that sometimes we're looking maybe in the wrong direction or not possibly seeing the whole picture. And so things that can be overlooked really are the causes of errors and the cost of those errors when somebody's burned out and fired
Mm,
or moving too quickly. And that could be billing errors, that could
mhm,
be hiring errors. I mean, you can really apply this to a lot of different things. Um, it could be that because that we're holding on to people too long because the cost of vacancy is, we need to get people in. And so we're afraid of that vacancy. But, that be difficult as well. There has to be systems in place to support. So train up or train out kind of a mindset is where I always go to is my first question is, do we have the support that's needed? And then I think a large one that I hear largely from the BCA community is what happens and all the pressure that goes on their shoulder when a peer might leave. And so they take on and they become frustrated and there's things that get dropped. The organization starts to slip in terms of who left. Maybe they left with the
Mm,
recipe of uh, the system, and now that system has to be
mm,
rebuilt, and walls are being dropped. It is a thread, I feel like if you pull the thread, it can just unravel a whole organization silently and slowly before you even realize, "Oh my gosh,
mm,
what happened to my sweater?" I think it happens very slowly, and so that's why it's not seen so much. Yeah, I mean, dissatisfaction, all of that customer, retention as well, it affects because they see that turnover, they feel that shift or that energy that of the services. Um, yeah, I mean, so I don't know, there's a lot that goes into, like, actually doing the calculation of what that looks like, but that's like talking about a formula. I can talk about the formula, but I think that what's more important is to understand why you need to start looking at that formula and try to prevent somebody from pulling out that thread, if you will.
mm. So at the very least, like be looking at data, and root causing sort of the why that people are leaving. But I hear you. It's that's like pulling the sweater can be this insidious thing that isn't like a big sort of eye-opening moment until it is a big eye-opening moment. At Ascend, we calculated, I think it's over $10,000 and that it costs for turnover. And that's in the combination of investment in training of, families not getting services. And that doesn't even include all of the qualitative, like everything that we're not allowing a child like be able to progress, right? That's a whole separate level. But this is, yeah, it's expensive.
It is, and when I'm doing my interviews, I talk about the trauma that's caused with turnover. I really wanna make sure that everybody's going into it with their eyes wide open because that regression is real and that trust, again, autism and trust it goes hand in hand. And
Mm,
you're gonna when you have people in and out, the trust in ABA is gonna diminish. You're gonna keep battling almost like a scar technique. Every time somebody else goes in, it's gonna be harder to reach them. And so it is meaningful for me, and the why that I do this and the big picture, which always leads back to the clients and then also the staff as well, because it's traumatic for us in different ways too, right?
mm,
So yes, I, want to try to protect people as much as I can because part of what they saw in my autism diagnosis is I see patterns very quickly. And part of that is being able to always, like, if you could see like a download happening, picturing the matrix is kind of what's going on in my
hmm.
head and all together. And so it's something that I want to really help with because the solutions are there. We're not putting our resources necessarily in the right
Yeah, no, I hear
place.
you. Like, but you're a recruiting expert, a recruiting leader, and you've been doing this for a long time in our field. What are some of the best practices that you'd share to help other ABA practice owners and the listeners? What's worked for you during your career?
Making sure that your talent advisors are really trained to identify and listen instead of sell. Something
Mm,
I always say and when I'm training is I hear you talking more than the person that you're interviewing. That's probably a sign that you won't be making a good decision. You're an advisor. So I changed the title of recruiter to advisor for a specific reminder that it's more important for everybody that we are a source of truth for them based on what we hear and really listen to and what we know about the company we service and to try to bridge the gap between a disconnect, especially as companies grow and stuff like that. Everybody has to come together and those things
mm,
will happen and wrinkles be worked out. But it can only really be worked out if you have a talent department that understands it and is working towards that goal. I'll drop the mic or get off my soapbox or whatever, but there's many different ways. I can't remember who I said it to, but there's many different ways from getting from A to B. And so you might go to the left and I might go to the right and we both land together at B. One way might not be better than the other. So this is just my way of what I think is important.
Holly Beth, like words have meaning, words have power, right? And this idea of going from the term recruiter to advisor, like that was just an aha moment for me, right? Because think about people in our lives who are advisors, they are trusted. We look to them to help us on whatever the next part of our journey is or what we want to learn versus a recruiter who's just trying to pull people in. And so I think that's a really subtle yet powerful shift in thinking about this role. Can you tell me about your craziest interview ever?
Okay. recruiters kind of have this joke that we should write a book. But I look at it as HIPAA information that's just between recruiters. Totally, totally good to talk about, grow and learn. But I will tell you the craziest interview I ever had really was probably yesterday. I couldn't, it took me a little bit to work through, but I choked on my own spit twice. And I don't know how that happened, but I sounded like Mickey Mouse trying to work through the conversation. And so I think that I am probably a story to be shared of. I had this interview and I could tell this woman choked on her own spit twice. So I don't know if that's really what you're looking for, but I definitely would say that was pretty crazy. Hopefully, I won't do that here. But
Yes. Right on. There's some kind of reference in there about walking and chewing bubble gum at the same time that I can't quite connect right now, but it's oh, that's awesome. What's one thing every ABA business owner should start doing and one thing they should stop doing, Holly Beth?
okay, short and sweet. I think, and I might be wrong, but Gandhi, I think, said, be the change you want to see in the world. And what I've heard in the ABA realm, and I don't want to misquote who I heard that from, but it wasn't me, but they say reinforce the behavior that you want to see in the world. And I agree with that, that my ad would be for business owners to really make sure that they're taking all perspectives into play so that they know what behaviors they should reinforce. So I would say that reinforce change you want to see in the world, but
Mhm.
also do that mindfully.
Right on. I love that. Well, I like the reinforce the behavior you want to see in the world as the Gandhi adaptation. But being mindful is important. And here's what came to my mind as you described that is, and I know I've mentioned before on the pod, I'm a fan of Greg McEwen's book, Essentialism, which is essentially says, don't try to do a bunch of these life and productivity hacks. Do fewer things. And where that comes into play here is being mindful about what those behaviors are, being very clear about those behaviors you want to see in the world, and then actively working toward those. And much better to be like laser focused on a small handful rather than trying to change every behavior, right? Or reinforce every kind of behavior.
Yeah, or read every book that, comes out that has ideas instead of, I heard this in a podcast yesterday about being knowledge seekers, but not knowledge implementers. And so doing
Mm.
some of that as trigger that. But yeah.
Oh, I love that. Yes. Knowledge seekers versus knowledge implementers. This is where I know I have to protect my teams from myself. Like when I go to a conference and this stream from the fire hose and I'm just like, yes. And then I come back the next day. I'm like, there's 600 things that I've learned that I want you to know now that we need to do. No, no, no. I come back and maybe there's one thing I share and that's it. I love that. Be knowledge seek, not knowledge
You're not
implementers.
alone. You're not alone. You're not.
Hey, throw one question at me, Holly Beth. Make me answer on the spot.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, I think my question is really related. So to set up the question, I just want to say, uh, it, so my husband makes fun of me because I share this story and he's like, "You realize you compared yourself to JFK?" And I was like, "Yeah," I wasn't really meaning to, but I was. But JFK really founded himself by a council of people, and that council of people, he made sure, at least again, just reading knowledge wasn't there. He really made sure that there was voices that disagreed with him within his council, so he could hear all the different perspectives. So my question to you is, how do you decide who is part of your council and your inner circle?
Ooh. Before I answer that, let me say that idea of farming dissent, of surround yourself by people who are not just going to be yes people is so critically important to being the best leader you can be. And that can be hard and vulnerable. So I want to reinforce that. So, this is funny, Holly Beth, because I actually just read a book called The Power of Who. And one of the
Mhm.
tasks that they recommend, it was a short, quick read. But one of the things they recommend is just go and make that list of 100 people who are your who, with the idea being that, and especially when it comes to networking and trying to find a new job, instead of trying to reach out to all kinds of different people you don't know and send random recruiters and advisors like resumes and cold outreach, no, focus on that small group of people whom you do know and who are part of that. There's a term he calls for the 100, but that circle. So I just did this exercise. By the way, you're one of the people that's on my list.
Aw, stop it.
But true story. What I Now there's a much smaller subset of people who are on that list that include my wife, Kim, my parents, my business partners, Will Bainig and Ryan Gilliam. And so there's sort of people who are going to like persist for some time. And then I have these like long time relationships of folks who are like I can't remember the term JFK used, it wasn't kitchen cabinet, but who I'll go to periodically and talk to about life or about anything related to the business. And there's a guy, Ward Hendon, who I randomly met on the Appalachian Trail like 23 years ago. And we hiked together for a few days, but that resulted in a lifelong relationship and friendship. And I've learned so much from him about being an entrepreneur. Or Dr. Rohit Verma, who was on the pod just a couple months ago, who was my first manager ever. He's on the list. What's important to me, and then I have advisors who I've engaged with like more formally in, each of the organizations that I've started and run. What's more important to me generally in choosing them is not like who's on that list, but how am I actively thinking about what my organizations or my needs are as a leader now, and how have those evolved? And then who are the right people that I need to be close to me for this next leg? I don't know if that answers the question, but that's how
It does, and you gave a delicious answer and one that really shows up at how I know you. So I think that that's evident in your podcast is that you are really good at going deep with dialogues and making those connections that are not superficial, but you like to go deep and figure things out. Um, so yeah, I mean, I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Holli Beth.
So now I'm going to have another book to read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Knowledge seek, right?
I'm a knowledge seeker. I'm guilty.
Holli Beth, where can people find you online?
So LinkedIn is really where I live. Sometimes I disappear because I need to conserve my communication skills. But LinkedIn is the easiest place. If you look at my LinkedIn, I'll send you a friend request because I'm assuming you might be interested in knowing me. And if not, that's okay too. But LinkedIn.
Oh, I love it. And if you don't follow Holli Beth on LinkedIn, you absolutely must. She puts out just wonderful content about her field, about life, a variety of things. And Holli Beth, it was probably a year ago that I learned that technique from you. Hey, if someone looks at your profile, go friend them. And I use the same thing now. It's so genius. So you have passed on your knowledge. Thank you. Humbly, thank you. Are you ready for the hot take questions?
Hit me.
All right. You're on your deathbed. What's the one thing you want to be remembered for?
I'd like to be remembered. So this is a serious one. So I'd like to be remembered for being there and really showing up for people. And I'm really good at it at work. I would say that I am building out my boundaries for my closer circle of counsel in my life. That's somewhere that I'm really strongly working on. But yeah, I just want to show up and be there and invite. So I think I'm in the right role.
Nice. What's your most important self-care practice?
Oh. Self-care practice, I would say would be going off of LinkedIn sometimes. I talk a lot, and I listen a lot, but it's a lot of communication both ways. And sometimes when there's a lot on my plate, especially personally, the hardest thing and the best thing for me is to give up LinkedIn.
What's your favorite song?
So I don't have one. I have a favorite person to listen to with songs. My daughter, Haley. Yeah.
Awesome. If you could give your 18-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Know that you're the only one that has to answer to yourself at the end of the day, and drive all decisions based on whether or not you're proud to look in the mirror. And if not, make a different choice.
Oh, such sage advice. All right. If you could only wear one style of footwear, what would it be?
Super easy, none. I do not like footwear. So I'm not wearing any currently. I try not to wear footwear. I don't care if I get a cut or a splinter or whatever. I am not a fan of shoes.
Oh, I love it. Barefoot all the way. Hey, Holli Beth, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation and being my friend. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to Building Better Businesses in ABA podcast. Stay tuned for our next exciting episode. In the meantime, please like, subscribe, share, and comment. We value your feedback. Don't forget to follow us on social media at elementrcm.ai.